Hey guys, today's going to be a little different because it's mostly a review. Okay, so we're going to put kind of everything we've learned about punctuation, our different sentence types together. All right, and then tomorrow we'll practice with all of our punctuation rules all together. Okay, first we're going to review punctuating the different sentence types with just our regular dependent clauses, the ones that begin with our subordinating conjunctions or awubis words, as we like to call them. And then we'll review dependent clauses that start with relative pronouns. All right, so like I said, this will all be review. I just want to refresh our memory so we can kind of practice with all of this stuff together. Okay? All right, so punctuation review with our awubis word dependent clauses. All right, if you're combining two independent clauses, just regular independent clauses, you must use a comma and a fanboys. Example, I went to the store, comma, and I got some milk. Or a semicolon. I went to the store, semicolon, I got some milk. Those are your only two options. You can't do semicolon fanboys, you can't do just a comma, you can't do just a fanboys. It's got to be comma fanboys or semicolon. Okay? Now, if you're combining independent and dependent clauses, you must put a comma after the dependent clause. So example, while I was at the store, comma, I got some milk. Now, if the dependent clause comes second, you don't have to do anything. So if it was, I got some milk while I was at the store, you don't need a comma. Okay? Now, let's do a few together. When I went to the rodeo, I saw many clowns and cowboys. So I start with the dependent clause, when I went to the rodeo, and then my independent clause, I saw many clowns and cowboys. All right, so I need to put a comma after my dependent clause since it comes first. Now, my next one, because it is a rodeo, there were also horses and bulls. Okay, so again, I'm starting with a dependent clause because it is a rodeo. And then my independent clause, there were also horses and bulls. So my dependent clause comes first, I need to put a comma after it. Okay, and make sure you're marking this on your own paper as well. Now, remember, if I had the independent clause first and the dependent clause second, I wouldn't need a comma. I could just say there were also horses and bulls because it is a rodeo. Right? The rodeo clowns interacted mainly with the audience, but the cowboys were around the animals. All right, so these are two independent clauses. I have the rodeo clowns interacted mainly with the audience, the cowboys were around the animals, and I've got my fanboy's butt in the middle. So I'm going to put a comma with that fanboys. All right, let's do my next one. The rodeo clowns performed silly stunts, and the cowboys competed to see who could stay on the bull the longest. All right, so now I've got a dependent clause starting with a relative pronoun who, okay? And remember, when it starts with a relative pronoun like who, which, that, whose, we're going to have different punctuation rules for it than we do with our dependent clauses with the awubis words. So let's review dependent clauses with the relative pronouns, okay? Now, here we're asking whether they're restrictive or non-restrictive. So a restrictive clause means it's essential, okay? And essential clauses do not need commas because we're not going to take them out of the sentence, okay? So we don't need to mark them as separate in any way. Right, now, restrictive clauses cannot be taken out of the sentence without changing the meaning, and restrictive clauses will usually tell us more about a certain noun. So they'll tell me specifically who or what that noun is, okay? So the student who sits in the back of the room asks a lot of questions. So here, my dependent clause is who sits in the back of the room, starting with my relative pronoun who. All right, and this is essential to the sentence. It's telling me exactly which student I'm talking about. If I just say the student asks a lot of questions, you don't know what I'm talking about, okay? But this one is telling me specifically which student, so it's essential. We don't want commas. All right, the results that I obtained may invoke positive social change. All right, so here I have my dependent clause that I obtained, starting with my relative pronoun that. All right, and they're telling me exactly what results I'm referring to. Because if I just say the results may invoke positive social change, you don't know what results I'm talking about. But here, you know it's the results that I obtained. All right, the journalist whose story I read yesterday has won prizes for her work. All right, whose story I read yesterday, same thing, giving me more information so I can specifically tell which journalist it is. All right, now, non-restrictive or non-essential clauses are when you have to worry about punctuation, because these are the ones that you put commas around. All right, now, non-restrictive clauses add information, but they can be taken out of the sentence without changing the meaning. And you'll often find non-restrictive clauses after proper nouns. So I want to thank Mark Smith, who is my loving and devoted father, for all of his love and support. All right, so I've already named the person. They're Mark Smith, okay? So this isn't necessary. I mean, it's good added information, but I don't need it to tell me who that noun is, okay? Because remember, these dependent clauses that begin with a relative pronoun are always referring back to an earlier noun. All right, the Leonard-Bernstein hypothesis, which I tested throughout the research, was rejected. All right, so again, I've got my dependent clause beginning with my relative pronoun which. All right, and I already know exactly which hypothesis it is, so this is just added information. All right, now hint, clauses that start with which are always non-restrictive. Clauses that start with that are always restrictive. All right, so hopefully that just refreshed your memory with all of this. So we'll do some practice with all of these things together tomorrow.